Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Um, Today I got a funny story, and it just happens to translate because some of the slang is the same in English as in Spanish. Before my beloved mom passed away, I took to asking her for stories, and because the people she would tell stories about are part of my history and they're all gone. So the people that can tell those stories are fewer and fewer. I know on the YouTube channels, a lot of people talk about, pride in their cultura, pride in their history. So as much as you can, get old pictures from those family members that are still around and are old and are telling the stories that will go away unless you hear them and pass them along. So that said, I had an uncle who was, he liked to party. And this was in Mexico. And my grandfather, um, he was really, really wealthy. Um, my dad was the black sheep, so we came here. And, you might know some of the story. We lived in the projects. It was always poverty. There was a lot of alcoholism, emotional and mental abuse. It you know it didn't affect my life really. So but he was wealthy, and he lived in the city close to downtown. His house, there was an alley next to it. I would walk through the alley and I would be at the movie theater and the plaza. So back then the wealthy people lived right there downtown, and the poor people lived up in the cerros. Then American culture went there, where here living up in the hills is a good thing. And so that was exported there, and those poor areas that were, up at the top of the hills now have beautiful homes that oversee, the valley there, that oversee the plaza. And this is in Michoacan. And so anyways, my uncle, he liked to go to he raised roosters, gamecocks. He would race horses. He packed a gun on them. They're a wealthy family in the town, right? And not just my grandfather, but his brother's even wealthier. And like my dad's cousins, they they got streets named after them there. It's a big town too. So, anyways, one day my uncle was coming home from a late night party, and he stops at the butcher shop. And on my grandfather's street, across the street was across the street, and maybe three stores down was a little bakery. Two down from that was a tortilleria. Two down from that was a tienda de albarotes, where a little convenience store. Um, Across the street from that might be a blacksmith. Two doors down from that was a butcher shop, and so there was all these little businesses, and even at night, people would sell food out of their home. Well, they were called cenas, and so you would go to people's houses and you would buy a cena. They would cook for you. I see that here in Sacramento now too, but back then, it was an exclusively a Mexico thing. And so, despite my grandfather being wealthy, the family across the street, they made soccer balls, and their houses were really neat because you would go in and there would just be like maybe two benches made from wicker and a couple of plants. And then that would be like where you would wait. And then there'd be another set of doors that go into the house. And sometimes it was open, so there was flowers on the walls, and the rooms would be off of that opening. Like it's like a huge skylight, but without a glass. It was just open. And I saw that their house recently sold for like $8 million. So, um, you know, it's grown. Um, so, anyways, one day my uncle, my tio's coming home, and it's early morning. The stores are just opening up for business, and he sees that this guy El Morongo, the butcher, was open. So he goes in and he orders some liver because he wanted to have some liver and onions later. And I like liver and onions. And so back then in Mexico, they would give you your groceries in what amounts to a brown paper bag, but I don't think it was wax paper, as my mom explained it. And that was part of the cool thing in her telling these stories, because she was helping to paint a picture of that time as well. And so my uncle buys some liver, and they wrap it up in the brown cardboard type paper packaging, and he leaves. He gets in his car to go home, and home is like half a street away. You know, because all these businesses are on the street. And so he gets in his car and he passes out. And when my mom told me the story, I thought of times when I've gone to Mexico and I'm walking along the plaza, and you know there's a barber shop, and I look in there and my uncle is just passed out, snoring while they're shaving him and cutting his hair, and he's drunk. You know what I mean? He's fucked up. And other times, you know, I'm like 10, 11 when I'm hanging out with him, and he was my godfather, so he called me ahijado. And we parked in Santana, Guanajuato. It was across the bridge. And he goes, "Don't let no one fuck with my truck." And at the time, he had a Ford F-150, which was the shit in Mexico at that time. Like, if you had that truck, it's probably like you have a 59 convertible here right now. It was the shit. This was before NAFTA. People were not wearing Nikes. They were wearing Mikes, Sykes, NKEs, like everything but the actual brand. They wanted stuff from here, but there was no trade agreement. But he had this like really nice Ford truck with a rack on the back so he could carry horses. And he says, "Don't let no one fuck with my truck." And so he goes off to buy some birria, I think, and the police come along. And they're like, "Hey, man, this truck can't be parked here." And I'm like, "Hey, I can't, I don't know how to move it. My uncle's coming back. This is his name." He said, "Leave it alone." And the cop took the license plates off and told me, "Tell him to come get his license plates from me." So my uncle comes back and I tell him. He gets hella mad. He goes, "Get out the fucking car and come with me." And he didn't usually yell at me, but he yelled at me. And we went in the police station, and he fucking slapped the cop and took his license plate back and said, "Don't be fucking with me." And he wasn't a gangster. It's just, if you were from certain families, you could get away with stuff just because, I don't know, money bought you privilege. So he got his license plate back. Then he told the cop to put it back on, and the cop put it back on. And so you know, that's how he was. And so he passes out in front of the butcher shop, and he has the bag like in his like he was holding it. And so the sun starts. It's about 6, 7. I don't know if my grandfather was coming back. Actually, he was coming back. So, like I said, he lived in the city, but every morning, maybe around 4:30 in the morning, he would get up, and my uncle would usually get up and go with him. That was part of the story, and nobody went with him that day. I don't know where my dad and my other uncle were, but nobody went with him. And Leon was usually the one that went with him, the one that bought the liver. And so he went and opened up his granja. So he had a farm. He had a few, but this was the main one where he raised pigs. And so he would go there in the morning and open up these big, giant 20-foot metal gates, and there were workers from like a little village, a little town, maybe a half mile away, and the houses were made of adobe. They had a little store where you could buy like individual cookies. It was it was really neat, and it was in like amongst these cerros with granjas that dotted them. And people talk about manufacturing going away after NAFTA and these trade agreements, but what people don't know is that Mexico lost all those little farms. American farmers own that now. That's what America got in exchange was, we lost manufacturing, but the ag industry gained a lot of Mexico's agriculture. And so, anyways, there was these little granjas, and he would open it up, and there were a couple guys that lived in the town that worked for him, and they'd come over, and some would go to work doing some stuff, but one would always go milk the cows. And so he would milk the cows and put the milk into these little aluminum, like the old school aluminum containers, and then they would load them up onto the truck and tie them on. And my grandfather had, like, in Mexico at the time, people didn't really have truck beds. They had like racks. So if you had a truck bed, you would put a rack on it so you can transport animals in the back of the truck. Or that was it. And my grandfather had a Datsun with a wood cage on the back, and then you could put these two wood slats that would effectually it would make it a pen. And so my grandfather's coming back with the milk, and then when he would get back to town, this old man pulling a burro with his own milk containers tied to the burro, 2 on each side, maybe 3 on each side, would buy the milk off my grandfather, and then they'd pour it into that, and then he would go up and down the street selling leche and crema. Leche. People would come out with their own little mini aluminum things, and then they would get the milk. It wasn't pasteurized, and apparently I liked it when I was little, but as an adult it would make me gag. And so my grandfather's coming home. I take a long time to tell a story, huh? People be getting mad at me for that shit, but he's coming home, and he sees my uncle there, and he's mad because he had to go do all this by himself. And he pulls up, and he's gonna come tell him something, and he sees him laid out with his hands, and it looks like his liver's hanging out. And so my grandfather, who was like a very stoic man, he didn't like laugh a lot. He was always serious. He liked being in the dark. Like, it was all business with him. One thing I hope to do that he did was he always carried like this pocket protector and would always be taking notes to remind him of stuff. And yeah, he was just a straight businessman. Like, he wasn't a partier. My other grandfather, he's kicking it in dive bars with fucking, people like over here, and bringing home strange women, talking about he brought us a new grandma, and we still got our grandma. He was off the hook different. They were very, very different. And I loved them both tremendously, and they both loved me. And so my grandfather sees him, and again, he's a very stoic, serious man, and he starts screaming, son, oh no, my son, my poor son, look what they did to you, son. Start shaking him. Son, who let you have it? Son, who let you have it? And my uncle wakes up. Fuck you mean, who let me have it? I bought this shit. So anyways, that was the joke. I'll probably tell it in Spanish too, so that if I might build a Spanish YouTube channel where I'm just sharing all the same stuff, but it's strictly in Spanish. Anyways, I hope you guys have a wonderful Friday, a wonderful weekend, and I hope you have a blessed day. Much love.